What do I use the studio for? It's a great alibi for not doing something else. All of these things that are happening in the world, which we're designed to take with us everywhere. But when I'm focused on the work, then the other stuff is still there, but it has a lesser effect than me lying in bed thinking about it. I prefer lying in bed thinking about work, and then when I'm at work, I like to think about lying in bed. When I moved from New York to here in Berlin, I had little pockets of information and pockets of objects and pockets of pictures in the States and in all different places in Europe. I brought all the boxes together into one place and I started to go through them. And as you can see in the studio here, it's full of potential. It's just boxes of stuff. Toasters, irons, kettles, pots and pans. If my art career really goes down the tubes, I've got a great second-hand store, you know. Lots of clothes and makeup and everything a girl needs. Knives, baseball bats, guns, broken glass, very light pornography, probably some money and probably some drugs and alcohol, some axes, some wolves, half a piano. That's where the ideas are coming from, through trawling through my past in a way. It's not a storage, it's a fairly active theatre of ideas. There are areas of the studio that I wouldn't let you in. That's storage. The rest of the stuff, which is semi-public, just shows the preoccupations that I have. And this is why there are so many reflective surfaces, because it's a lot to do with, you know, self-reflection. And to go through things and see if there's anything that can be thrown away. I mean, why do I need 7 footballs? I'm not even good with 1. But I've got 7. I know why. And maybe one day you'll know why. But, you know, I've got to let these things percolate and they'll come out at the right time. When we worked on Zidane, I always said, 10 years to make it, it'll take 15 years for it to hit home. And I'm in it for the long haul, you know. If it takes 25 years to make sense, that's fine. There's a great story called A Rebours, where a character touches an object and suddenly experiences the history of the object. He does this in an apartment and it's full of antiques. I have a studio full of shit, and I have to remember why I kept that shit. And I can concoct stories around it and fabricate a future for it, in a way. Yeah, what am I going to do with these pictures? My mum's coming in half an hour. I just started my professorial duty in Frankfurt on Monday night, actually. I'm the film class professor. It's very serious. And one of the things I said to one of the students was that, you know, I was a very diligent student, and I did my life drawing class, and I did my stained glass window class, and I did my mural painting class. The only class that I really got deliberately ill enough not to be able to attend was the video class. I always hated it. I knew what I liked, and what I liked was film. And there was something very primal in that for me, in that I don't really like information to be shot straight into my eye. I always preferred the idea that you were getting it in some kind of a third-hand way. You have the celluloid, a light passes through, it hits a screen, and then your eye gets it. And there's something softer, even if you're watching a very hard series of images with difficult ideas, I think there's a softer landing. It's very telling that technocrats and technicians have been pushing video to be as close to film as possible. Therefore, film is still on that pedestal. When I started looking at films in a certain way and doing almost nothing to them except representing the way that they would be seen or could be seen, that definitely is coming from the kind of intellectual rigor that I had through my studies in London. But I think the choices of the films that I work on were probably coming from this much more autobiographical exercise. Let's take, for example, Hitchcock's Psycho and Taxi Driver, for instance. I didn't see Psycho, I think, until I was about 21. And I didn't see Taxi Driver until I was about 26 or 27. I mean, there was a lot to do with the old experience of cinema as well, and the fact that there was something happening, I think, in the 1980s, in Britain at least, that cinema was going down and TV and the VCR was coming up. And, you know, my experience of film was definitely much more in the domestic situation rather than the communal cinematic or cathedral of cinema, which I like to think about sometimes. And then when I got into it and I, you know, hit the French New Wave, and, you know, one of the most important books, I think it's one of the best books on cinema ever, is the interviews between Hitchcock and Truffaut. And that was a kind of a turning point, I think, for me, when I realized that there were different types of cinema. They could be deconstructed, and you could openly seduce people at the same time as being slightly intellectual. One of my students actually in Frankfurt said to me, when was the last time you went to the cinema? And I had to kind of lie and say, I never go to the cinema for moral reasons. But the last time I was in the cinema was to see my work. The last time I was in the cinema before that was to see my work. The last time I was in the cinema before that was to see my work. And that just sounds like such a load of wank. To a student, it's not really, you know, sometimes it's better not to tell the truth. When I started to work with the material, and I mean the material would be a videotape, and, you know, like an innocent person, I did take out a videotape and held it up, and there's nothing to see. And that's magical as well. It appears to be nothing, but it contains all this information of a different, you know, I suppose it's the early idea of the avatar, in a way, that the cinema screen has all these characters behind. And I think with 24-Hour Cycle, when I installed that in Glasgow for the first time in 1993, I wanted to put the screen in the middle of the space, so when you went behind it, you just saw it, the same thing from the other side, but from the other side. So that's where I started to get interested in the mirror image. I went from there into hospital archives and started to dig around for images which looked magical because they were shot by, you know, cinematographers, even though they were done apparently for medical purposes. It became kind of obvious that I was going to have to get behind the camera one day. rather than stand in front of the mirror, I had to take another step back and be behind the camera and behind the lens, also in front of a mirror. It's such a perfect day. I'm glad I spent it with you. Oh, such a perfect day. You just keep me. You know, I knew I had to start making films. And actually the first film that I made was called feature film. Maybe I wasn't confident enough to think that I would make anything other than that. So I had this kind of very teenage, vain idea that in my life I always wanted to write a short novel, make a record, and make a feature film. So at least I got the feature film done. And having done that, which was a study of a conductor with an orchestra, the orchestra I'd never seen, so how would you know that he would be a conductor? And the orchestra are playing the score to Hitchcock's Vertigo. And when we showed that, some people who saw it had asked me questions like, how many little images did you slip in from Vertigo? Because they really think that they saw James Stewart or Kim Novak in my film, and it never happened. But the cinematic experience and the music obviously was powerful enough that images were coming from inside of their head and they were projecting their images onto my film. And I thought that that's an incredibly sophisticated and perverse thing to happen. After making feature film, and I was quite confident by that time then about working in the industry. So the premise for Zidane was, what if we make a feature film which is a portrait, and why not make it around a football player? And of course, when we went to see Zidane, it became three questions. What if, why not? And Zidane said, why me? And we said to him, no one really knows what aftershave you wear. We don't know if you go out to nightclubs. You exist from the first kick of the ball until the final whistle. And that's what's incredibly special about you as a player. He represents something which is exclusively him, completely chimeric, so he becomes everyone else. The day before the match, that's when our crew started to arrive. And you can imagine 17 or 18 cameras, each camera having an operator, a focus puller, a loader and a runner. I think the crew was about 150 or something like that. The pressure was on. And still the producers were saying to us, you have to make a storyboard. And we said, we can't, it's a live event. And they said, but you have to be able to say something to the operators about what it is that you want. So Philippe and I kind of had a little chat. The collection of portraits in the Prado is probably one of the best in the world. So we took our camera guys there on the morning of the game, and they opened up the doors to the Prado, and we walked in through the Goya entrance, and you have this vast corridor of portrait after portrait after portrait, and we said to the film guys, to the operators, this is our storyboard. Look down the corridor and imagine that every painting is a film still. And as we're walking past, please look carefully at every still that you're seeing. Now, we are shooting at 24 frames a second, but we want all of the information that you're seeing from this Goya, which probably took about a year to paint. We want a year's worth in everything. So we obviously set the bar pretty high, and it was astonishing. These guys who look at people and look at events as their daily bread had never seen anything quite like that. One of the most beautiful memories that I have is standing in front of these two paintings of the Duchess of Alba, I think it is. Both by Goya. Same woman lying on a chaise. One, she has her clothes on. One, she is not wearing clothes. But the angle of observation is slightly different. And Philippe and I were saying, we don't really know how to explain what's going on here, but look at the dynamic between the two pictures. It's a phenomenon. So, we got the most expensive storyboard in the history of film done because we used the Prado. I don't think that anybody that I really respect thinks of themselves in any world. The best chefs that I know are always involved in something else. The best filmmakers are always involved in something else. The best singers are always doing something else. I think you can be hermetic, but within your little hermit cave or whatever, I think it's important that you have something else happening somewhere else in the world. One of the best comments that a teacher ever made to our class in Glasgow was, you're here for 4 years, don't feel that you have to leave and be an artist. Just enjoy those 4 years that you have here, because you'll never have this amount of freedom again. And, as a little lotus eater that I am, I wanted to perpetuate that 4 years for as long as possible. So that's why I don't really have a huge engagement with what's perceived to be the art market or the art world or the film world or anything else. People will always put you in a pigeonhole. Why would you fly in on your own? most people talk about desire in the singular, but I'm wondering if it's plural and if all or many desires can coexist at the same time. And even that there could be a conflict between one desire and the other desire. One might end up, suffocating the other one. Certainly the earliest reference would be to a film called The Red Balloon, Last Tango in Paris. An older film called Le Corbeau, The Raven. And then I suppose the most contemporary film is Claire Denis' kind of masterpiece amongst many, called Beau Travail. So these are, I would say, the 4 points of connection for this show. When I was trying to speak about this piece in Pont-Lodi with the lampadaire and the balloon outside, I didn't want to say too much because I don't want to give I'm giving these elements, and they're quite clear. There's a lampadaire, there's a burning lamp, there's a rope, there's a balloon, but then there's a blue sky or a cloud, or rain or wind. So I give specific fixed pieces, but then we are using literally the landscape. Actually, you would hope that everyone should have that feeling of whatever self-interest, self-confidence, and security. Because if you provide a platform for whether it's a child or an adult, if you provide a platform for self-confidence, this is when the real questions can start. If you start from a position of weakness and, let's say, pressure or confrontation, I don't think that leads to, let's call it, great philosophical thinking. I think that the platform for movement ahead is to feel, avec les pieds sur la terre, c'est sûr. It's good to have the wings and the feet on the ground and the horns and the... Qu'est-ce que c'est ça? Yeah, the nimbus. So from the nimbus to the nombril, you hope something is working. Getting into Beau Travail, I would play Corona, Rhythm of the Night, 24 hours a day. Then it stopped, and I started to listen to peaceful things, and I started to make these aquarelles in the same method that Denis Lavant is making the bed. So I start to inhabit the film. The film gets right under my skin. In reference to the Last Tango in Paris, I found out that Marlon Brando and I are the same size. So the coat here is the coat for me based on a memory of Marlon Brando's coat, except there's no... Now, what do we do when we're wearing clothes, Buttons, pockets. Now, if you have no pockets and no buttons, what are we going to do with these? Well, you go for butter. I always loved butter, I don't love it anymore, but when I was young, I really loved butter. But I felt like I never really exercised how desire for something can turn into something pretty nasty. So that's been sitting with me since I was a teenager, and eventually I tried to do something with the butter with my 2 hands, and then I realized 1 hand is enough to do something. And that allowed me to have my left hand filming my right hand. Imagine if it had been the other way around. One day, I'm in my studio and I decide not to drink wine. But I know that I don't want to cut off the grapes. So I buy grapes and I'm eating the grapes, delicious, 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 and then they're gone. So the desire is still there, but the fruit is gone. So who stole the fruit? Me. So I'm left with, it's my fault that I have nothing, in a way. And I keep looking and looking and looking at this thing, and I think, yeah, this is like a mirror, this little branch. And I thought, well, let's take it further. Let's, rather than have it as a small, I could either have done a gigantic hand with a small branch, or I could make the branch bigger. The body's not dead yet. You could say it's a public inquiry and a private investigation, and it could be a forensic examination, but the body is still alive. I am. I believe I'm still alive, So it's not over yet. I mean, I kind of have a fantasy or a desire that I could do this show again in 20 years. And it may just, we may be investigating or doing our forensic work in a different way. In my work in general, there is a kind of tragicomic element that someone said, why would you do work where every year you have to do something more? And I said, because then if someone buys it, they're hoping I stay alive. So at least there's one person in the world who hopes I'm going to stay alive. the last exhibition that I saw in this space, Yanis Kournelis was a huge influence on me, still is a huge influence on me, but critically was a big influence on me when I was a student in Glasgow. And this is quite incredible for me that I end up in a space that he inhabited. And the show before Yanis was Lawrence Weiner, who is an immense influence on me. So I feel in a way that to make an exhibition in a space like this is a lot to do. There's a performative aspect about exhibition making. There's a responsibility for your audience because you acknowledge the first point. And then I think as an artist you get to go home and measure yourself alongside your peer group. And I think that this is partly why I wanted to show work like this in this space. It's not only about me, it's about the legacy of this exhibition program here in this space in Berlin and the way that we think it can go on.
In the exhibition here at Blaine Southern, the film was shot in Tangier in Morocco, which obviously deals with very, very contemporary issues about, even if in a very subtle way, about the relation of North and South, East and West, immigration and the way we perceive that part of the world and the way that part of the world perceives us. This is actually quite exceptional, I have to say, because artists either concentrate on their own background and culture or somehow explore other cultures in a sort of merely anthropological way. But Douglas doesn't do that. The films that he made about other places have a very, very, not only very, very personal touch, but also have a way to explore them which is very much imbued, very much in depth of that place without actually being voyeuristic.
I think, quite often there's a misinterpretation of certain elements of my work, which is that, because I'm taking things from cinema, because I'm taking things from literature, because I'm taking things all the time, that it's somehow an apolitical practice. And I think one of the important things about this installation here was that this is absolutely not apolitical. It's quite political. I spend part of my life traveling to the Middle East and occasionally to North Africa. And I noticed, of course, this isn't Glasgow, this is somewhere else. And I wanted to, I suppose, kind of recognize the difference, celebrate the difference, acknowledge a certain anxiety, and try to make some kind of sense out of it. And when I say making sense out of something, I don't mean that to be 1 + 1 = 2. Sense is 1 + 1 plus, 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 plus. And I suppose the equal thing will come later. And I suppose that's the point of making art, full stop. I think that, artists do have a job, and the job is to constantly question. And that's our job. Answers are supposed to be given or provoked towards other people to give them, and then everyone else is supposed to decide what they want. But it's necessary for the society, for the nature, for the globe, that we have a group of people who constantly question. There's still a cynical attitude towards the idea of questioning. that it's somehow an ineffective malpractice. And I don't really know how this is in Germany. That's probably why I'm here, because I don't know what the situation is here. But I think that in a city like Berlin, the idea to constantly question is just normal. Answers come later. Questioning is now.
Douglas Gordon er kendt for at have sådan en meget rå æstetik og også en meget rå tematik. Men der er også altid i hans værker en form for sart side eller en lys side, hvor der er håb. Og den side har ikke været prioriteret særlig højt i de udstillinger, man har set med ham hidtil. Men det har vi prøvet at finde en balance i på den her udstilling, hvor man får begge sider af sagen med. Man har en livslang interesse for menneskets psykologi. Det her med, hvornår man går fra at være god til at blive ond. Hvad er det, der sker i et menneskes personlighed, når den glidning finder sted? Det er en sindssygt smuk udstilling. Der er nogle virkelig smukke, sanselige videoværker, som man kan gå til helt umiddelbart bare at være i og opleve musikværker, lydværker, men også bare billeder, som har en helt særlig sensibilitet, man ikke ser nogen anden kunst.
And you know, I came from a background in art school which wasn't about this monocular view. I never believed in it, you know. There's a reason, I suppose, why we have two eyes, not one, and two ears, not one. So it's always better with two, at least with two. So I came from a background in art school in Glasgow, which was always insisting on collaboration, really insisting on collaboration. So almost everyone in Glasgow was in a band. I mean, really, almost everyone was in a band. I mean, I wasn't, but I collaborated with Craig Richardson and Ewan Sutherland with performance art. So the idea of collaboration was already there, and collaborating in real time, of course, is different from collaboration in preparation for something. But I think what interested me about specifically these people that I mentioned, you know, Liam and Philippe, and say Rickret and Karsten, I mean, you know the bunch of people, I mean, was that there was preparation for collaboration. So the process is involved, but there was also a real-time element where change could happen as a live event in a way, that change could happen in front of people. Nothing had to be perfect before presentation, but the presentation itself never really stops. And I don't really know what happens now. I mean, I still work with Philippe. I haven't worked with Liam for a long time. Rickret and I are in touch. Karsten and I haven't done anything for a while. But what I see in the art school in Frankfurt, when I'm teaching, is that it's incredibly promiscuous in the art sense, you know. I mean, it's almost impossible to identify a single person who's not working with someone else. It's almost impossible. Certainly within my class, I think everyone is working with someone else. Whether it's on the main channel of work or whether it's a peripheral aspect of their practice, it's absolutely embedded in the culture, certainly of that school. I think, therefore, it's embedded in the culture of art made by people younger than me. And I suppose, you know, there is a kind of, what does that mean? Does that mean that you have a dilute version of yourself? I don't think so. You know, I think that there are things which are emphatically yours and there are things which are emphatically ours. And I don't know if that's really changed a lot since the 1990s, or for that matter, the 1960s or the 1950s. You know, when I was talking to Jonas Mekas last week in New York, and of course he's always referring to the Fluxus people. It's almost difficult to identify who was who, but when you see them individually, you know who was who. You know, so there is a great tradition of collaboration, crossover, intermixing, you know. You know, I've got two children, one blonde, one dark. Two different mums, one blonde, one dark. Two types of studio, one more open, the other one extremely private. My assistants, wait a minute, I've got one blonde and one dark. This makes me sound like a terrible Alfred Hitchcock type manipulative character. But most of the friends that I have are like that. Most of the people that we've been talking about have this double, you know, it's, what is it? I mean, I say there's not a fracture, I think we are holding on like that. And I don't know if it's, I always see it positively, you know, double vision can be really good. Double vision can be really. The film is about 1 minute for every year of Jonas Mekas' life. Over many years, I would pick up stories that he would tell, and one particular night in a hotel room just outside of Bordeaux, we were having a glass of wine, and he just came out with this story, which is actually not in his book, but it's how the film starts. I can demonstrate with my cup of tea because frequently when Jonas is talking, he has a glass in his hand. Frequently, not all the time. But he would say something like this. And I would impersonate Jonas. I did it once, and he came into the room while I was trying, and he said, "Not bad, not bad." So we have a kind of a running joke with that, so I can get away with that. He's telling the story of the first image that he ever made. He's standing at the edge of the farm in his village. It must have been like the end of the summer, and it was just dust everywhere. And suddenly these Soviet tanks roll through.
This is a good chance now for me to take my first pictures, to use this camera. So I ran to the road and I snapped a picture, very happy. And a Russian officer, he was an officer, I could figure it more or less out, runs to me, grabs my camera from my hands, pulls out, rips the film out, throws it into the dust on the road and rubs it in with his boot into the dust.
And I said, so somewhere in Lithuania, layers and layers and layers below the surface, is the first image that you ever took. It's like a sculpture, a hidden sculpture. And he started laughing, and I said, well, shouldn't someone make a film of your life story? Yes, yes. Mm. It's based on a book that he wrote called I Had Nowhere to Go, which is a kind of a diary, travelogue. It's about the journey that he made from his village in Lithuania through Europe and ends up in New York City.
Yes, this is America, and this is the 20th century.
A lot of the film is based on misunderstandings and chance happenings. This fellow somehow manages to evade capture and survive on nothing but a potato, for a long, long time.
October 3rd, 1950. My co-workers are all from Brooklyn. When they talk, every other word is fuck you. It's not a curse word. It's a mood note, just a sound with a million different nuances. A nuance for each occasion. With that one little expression, fuck you, one can express absolutely everything. Have you a girl? Fuck you. Help me here. Fuck you. 12 o'clock. Fuck you. The drill broke. Fuck you. What do you think about Stalin? Fuck you.
If I were going to the cinema and I saw this thing called I Had Nowhere to Go, I would probably have some images in my head before I even opened my eyes, in a way. So I tried to keep that spirit, so there's really very little to see on screen. So this idea of the hidden images, censored to some extent, but they're still there. Yeah, it's a film that's really proposing another film. It's quite good to close your eyes in a cinema, sometimes.
Douglas Gordon ist sicherlich einer der wichtigsten, einer der einflussreichsten Künstler seiner Generation. Man könnte sagen, er ist vielleicht ein Star auch heute regelrecht. Er hat sehr viel bewegt mit dem, was er gemacht hat, mit seiner Beschäftigung mit Film, mit Filmgeschichte. Und das MMK hat auch eine sehr bedeutende Arbeit von ihm in der Sammlung, die Arbeit Play Dead und darüber hinaus noch einige kleinere Werke. Und das war für uns der Anlass, in diesem Jubiläumsjahr eben diesem wichtigen Künstler unserer Sammlung eine große Präsentation zu geben, auch als Abschluss im Prinzip unseres Jubiläumsjahres. Und diese Ausstellung ist auch die größte Museumsausstellung, die Douglas seit vielen Jahren in Europa hat.
Henry Rebel ist die neueste Filminstallation von Douglas Gordon, die Sie hier im Film nur im Aufbau sehen können. In der zentralen Halle wird auf 2 übereinander getürmten Leinwänden die Performance eines jungen Schauspielers zu sehen sein. Es geht dabei um 2 Szenen aus dem Film Rebel Without a Cause von Nicholas Ray von 1955, die nie gedreht wurden. Douglas Gordon hat die beiden Szenen, ein Mann läuft brennend aus einem Haus und ein Mädchen wird gepeitscht, interpretiert. Douglas Gordon verfolgt mit der Kamera in der gleichen Weise die Performance des jungen Schauspielers wie zuvor den Elefanten in der Inszenierung von Play Dead Real Time. Play Dead Real Time heißt die Filminstallation, die sich seit 2005 in unserer Sammlung befindet. Die Kamera umkreist einen Elefanten in einem weißen Galerieraum und beobachtet dessen Bewegung. Insbesondere auf den Befehl hin, Play Dead, das mühevolle Hinlegen des Elefanten und das genauso mühevolle Aufstehen. In einer Ecke des Raumes sieht man auf einem Monitor das Auge des Elefanten, das für Sekundenbruchteile den Betrachter zu fixieren scheint. Und das ist der Moment der höchsten Empathie. Sidan, A 21st Century Portrait von 2006, ist eine Arbeit, die in verschiedenen Formen gezeigt werden kann. Hier im MMK wird sie zum ersten Mal auf 18 einzelnen Monitoren gezeigt. Und jeder Monitor zeigt das Material einer der Kameras, die rund um das Spielfeld aufgestellt wurden, um allein Zinedine Zidane aufzunehmen. Das so entstandene Porträt zeigt ihn aus unterschiedlichen Perspektiven, die jetzt alle gleichzeitig zu sehen sind. Die Arbeit K364 dreht sich um zwei jüdische Musiker, einen Geiger und einen Bratschisten, die mit dem Zug von Berlin nach Warschau zu ihrem Konzert reisen. Aufgeführt wird dort die Sinfonia Concertante, Köchelverzeichnis 364. Auf dem Weg dorthin wird in Bildern und Erzählungen über das Verhältnis von Geschichte und Lebensgeschichte und dem Moment des ästhetischen Jetzt reflektiert, den wir besonders in der Musik erleben können. Douglas Gordon ist vor allen Dingen bekannt geworden durch seine Film- und Videoarbeiten. Sein Werk ist aber vielfältiger. In unserer Ausstellung im MMK zeigen wir darüber hinaus auch Text- und Fotoarbeiten, wie zum Beispiel Self-Portrait of You and Me mit neuen Arbeiten zu Andy Warhol und James Dean. Etwas ganz Besonderes sind die beiden Arbeiten Straight to Hell and No Way Back, bilderreiche und materialreiche Sammlungen zum Leben des Künstlers, die gewissermaßen ein kaleidoskopisches Porträt des Künstlers selbst bilden. Und die Zusammenarbeit oder das Zusammenspiel von den unterschiedlichen Themen und Materialien entsteht ein sehr komplexes Bild vom Schaffen dieses Künstlers durch gegenseitige Erläuterungen und Verweise.
You know, one of the first things that I can trace my interest in making art which uses cinema goes back to maybe the first time I visited London, and I went to the Tate Gallery and I saw the work of actually both Francis Bacon and Barnett Newman. But specifically Barnett Newman. I was really kind of impressed by the colour field was so intense that when you closed your eyes and moved away, that there was still a residual impact or a retinal image held after the fact. Therefore, it's not a still image, it's a moving image. So out of painting, I got interested in this idea of the moving image. At the same time, I was kind of shocked by the scale of it, and I actually timed how long it took me to walk from one end of a painting to the other. And that was really where one of the impetus for me to try and deal with time, or not deal with, but to try and struggle actually with time.
Yeah, okay.